The boardroom fell silent when Tessa Jenkins walked in wearing her second-hand blazer, but she held her head high because she had earned this interview fair and square. Isaac Jameson watched from his corner office as the young woman crossed the lobby, noting the way she straightened her shoulders despite the worn edges of her portfolio case. His assistant had nearly rejected her application outright when the background check revealed her address in the lowest income district of the city, but something about her credentials made him override that decision. Now, as CEO of Jameson Maritime Industries, one of the largest shipping companies on the East Coast, he made it a point to sit in on interviews for senior analysts. The company his grandfather built was worth $3 billion, and Isaac took his responsibility to it seriously. Tessa sat across from the interview panel, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had spent the last of her savings on bus fare to get here, leaving her small apartment in the projects before dawn. The three executives facing her looked polished and expensive, their watches probably worth more than everything she owned combined. But she had her mind, her education earned through scholarships and night shifts at a diner, and her absolute determination to prove that her ZIP code did not define her capabilities. "Miss Jenkins," the HR director began, glancing at her resume with barely concealed skepticism, "you have impressive academic credentials, but you lack practical experience in our industry." "That's true," Tessa said clearly. "But I spent 4 years studying maritime economics and logistics while working 40 hours a week to support myself. I can analyze shipping routes and cost efficiency in my sleep. What I lack in corporate experience, I make up for in hunger and dedication." Isaac leaned forward slightly in his chair. There was fire in this woman's eyes, something real and raw that he rarely saw in the parade of entitled graduates who usually graced these interviews. The questioning continued for another 30 minutes, growing progressively more technical. Tessa answered each question with precision, occasionally pulling out handwritten notes from her portfolio to reference specific case studies she had analyzed on her own time. When they presented her with a hypothetical scenario involving a supply chain crisis, she worked through the problem methodically, her solution both creative and cost-effective. "Thank you, Miss Jenkins," the HR director said finally, her tone implying dismissal. "We'll be in touch." Tessa gathered her things, knowing what that phrase usually meant. She had made it further than she expected, at least. As she stood, the door to the connecting office opened, and a man in his early 30s stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to see straight through her. "Actually," Isaac said, his voice carrying natural authority, "I'd like to speak with Miss Jenkins privately for a moment." The interview panel exchanged glances but filed out obediently. Tessa remained standing, uncertain, as the CEO closed the door behind them and gestured for her to sit back down. "Mr. Jameson," she began, but he held up a hand. "Your solution to that supply chain problem was the best I've heard in 6 months of interviews," he said directly. "But I need to be honest with you about something. My family has certain expectations about the kind of people we hire for senior positions. Your background will be an issue." Tessa felt her cheeks flush with anger and humiliation. "I see. Then why waste both our time?" "Because I don't share their prejudices," Isaac replied, meeting her gaze steadily. "I built half this company's current success on merit-based decisions, but I'm also a realist. If I hire you, you'll face opposition, not just from my family but from others in the company who think like them. The question is whether you're willing to fight that battle." Something in his directness, his refusal to hide behind corporate politeness, made Tessa pause. "Are you offering me the position?" I'm offering you a chance to prove yourself. 3 months contract basis. If you perform as well as I think you will, it becomes permanent. If you don't, or if the politics become too much, you walk away with 3 months' salary and a solid reference. Either way, you'll have more on your resume than you do now. Tessa studied him, trying to read his motivations. His expression was serious but open. No pity in his eyes, just a straightforward business proposition. Why are you doing this? Because 20 years ago, people looked at my grandfather the same way the interview panel looked at you today. He was a dock worker who built an empire. I remember what it took for him to get there, and I remember the people who gave him chances along the way. Isaac stood and extended his hand. So what do you say, Miss Jenkins? She shook his hand, his grip firm and warm. I say you won't regret this, Mr. Jameson. Isaac. And I don't think I will. The following Monday, Tessa arrived at Jameson Maritime's headquarters at 7 in the morning, 2 hours before her official start time. She had spent the weekend in the public library, researching every detail of the company's operations she could find. The security guard looked surprised to see her but checked her new ID badge and waved her through. Her office was small but had a window, a luxury she had not expected. She was setting up her desk when Isaac appeared in the doorway, 2 coffee cups in hand. Thought you might need this, he said, offering her one. First days are always rough. Thank you. Tessa accepted the cup, surprised by the gesture. CEOs did not typically deliver coffee to new analysts. I wanted to catch you before the office fills up, Isaac continued, leaning against the doorframe. My mother is the company's CFO. She'll be in around 9. I've informed her of your hiring, but I want you to be prepared. She's not pleased. I can handle difficult people, Tessa said, more confidently than she felt. I know you can. But Catherine Jameson is not just difficult. She's formidable. She also happens to believe that the company should maintain certain standards about who represents the Jameson name. His expression was apologetic but honest. Just don't take it personally. She judges everyone by impossible standards, even you, especially me. A slight smile crossed his face, transforming his serious features into something warmer. But we're not here to discuss my complicated family dynamics. Let me show you the current projects you'll be working on. The next 2 hours flew by as Isaac walked her through the company's active shipping routes, current contracts, and problem areas needing analysis. He was a patient teacher, answering her questions thoroughly and treating her insights with genuine respect. Tessa found herself relaxing, caught up in the intellectual challenge of the work. The spell broke when a sharp knock sounded on the open door. A woman in her late 50s stood there, impeccably dressed in a designer suit, her silver hair styled in a perfect bob. Her resemblance to Isaac was striking, the same blue eyes and strong features, but where his expression had been warm, hers was ice cold. Isaac, a word in your office. Now. Mother, this is Tessa Jenkins, our new senior analyst. Tessa, my mother, Catherine Jameson, our CFO. Catherine's gaze flicked over Tessa like she was assessing inventory. Miss Jenkins, I trust you'll find our expectations here quite rigorous. I look forward to meeting them, Mrs. Jameson, Tessa replied evenly, refusing to be intimidated. Catherine's lips thinned and she turned back to Isaac. Your office. After they left, Tessa exhaled slowly and returned to her desk. Through the glass walls of Isaac's office across the hall, she could see Catherine speaking animatedly, her gestures sharp with displeasure. Isaac's posture remained calm, his responses measured. The conversation lasted 15 minutes before Catherine swept out, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floors. Isaac returned to Tessa's office shortly after, looking tired. That went about as well as expected. I'm sorry for causing problems between you and your family. You're not causing anything. This is about them, not you. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that made him seem suddenly more human, less like the untouchable CEO. Look, there's a company dinner this Friday, quarterly review for department heads and senior staff. You should be there. Is that wise, given your mother's reaction? It's necessary. You're part of this team now. Besides, he added with a hint of defiance, I'm still the CEO. I decide who gets invited to company functions. The week passed in a blur of work. Tessa threw herself into the projects Isaac had assigned, determined to prove her worth. She worked late every night, often finding herself alone in the office except for the cleaning crew. On Thursday evening, she was deep into a cost analysis when she sensed someone nearby. Looking up, she found Isaac standing in her doorway again. "Do you ever go home?" he asked, but his tone was amused rather than critical. "I could ask you the same thing," Tessa countered, noticing his loosened tie and rolled sleeves. "It's past 9. Board reports wait for no one." He stepped into her office, glancing at her computer screen. "What are you working on?" Tessa explained the inefficiency she had discovered in one of their Pacific routes, showing him how a small adjustment in the schedule could save substantial fuel costs. Isaac listened intently, asking sharp questions, and eventually pulled up a chair beside her to work through the calculations together. They lost track of time, the conversation flowing from logistics to broader business philosophy. Tessa found herself sharing her perspective on sustainable shipping practices, expecting pushback, but Isaac engaged thoughtfully with her ideas. He challenged her assumptions but listened to her reasoning, treating her like an equal despite the vast difference in their positions and backgrounds. "You know," Isaac said finally, glancing at his watch and looking surprised to see it was nearly 11, "you're the first person in years who's made me excited about the work again. Most days it's just politics and profit margins. You actually care about doing things right. Is that so unusual?" Tessa asked, carefully saving her work and shutting down her computer. "In my world, yes." He stood, stretching slightly. "Can I give you a ride home? It's late." Tessa hesitated. She had been taking the bus, a 90-minute journey involving 2 transfers. But accepting a ride from the CEO felt like crossing a line. "That's not necessary." "It's past 11, Tessa. And unless I'm mistaken, you live in the South District, which means you're looking at a long trip on public transit this time of night. Let me do this one small thing without making it weird." Put that way, refusal seemed churlish. "All right, thank you." His car was in the executive parking garage, and Tessa tried not to react when she saw it was a sleek black Mercedes. Isaac seemed to sense her discomfort because he said casually, "It was a gift from my father when I made CEO. I actually prefer trucks, but family expectations and all that." The drive through the city was quiet at first, the streets mostly empty. Tessa directed him toward her neighborhood, watching his face for any reaction as the buildings grew progressively more rundown. To his credit, Isaac's expression remained neutral. "You grew up around here?" he asked, not judgmentally, just curious. 2 blocks from where I live now. My mom raised me and my 2 brothers in a 1-bedroom apartment after my dad left. She worked 3 jobs to keep us fed." Tessa surprised herself with her honesty. "She died when I was 19, breast cancer. No insurance, so by the time she finally went to the hospital, it was too late." "I'm sorry," Isaac said quietly, and something in his voice told her he meant it. "It's why I fight so hard. Everything I do, every success, it's for her. Proof that her sacrifices meant something." Tessa pointed to a worn building ahead. "That's me, the one with the blue door." Isaac pulled up to the curb and turned to face her. In the dim light from the street lamps, His features were softer, more open. "Thank you for sharing that with me. And for the record, your mother would be incredibly proud of you." The sincerity in his words made Tessa's throat tight. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and got out of the car. She watched him drive away, feeling oddly unbalanced by the evening. Isaac Jameson was not what she had expected. He was brilliant and driven, yes, but also kind in a way that seemed genuine rather than calculated. It was dangerous, she realized, to start seeing him as anything other than her boss. Friday's company dinner was held at an exclusive restaurant downtown, the kind of place where Tessa felt immediately out of place despite her best dress, borrowed from a friend. She arrived exactly on time, her stomach tight with nerves. Isaac was standing near the bar talking to a group of executives when she entered. His eyes found hers immediately, and he excused himself to come greet her. "You made it," he said, smiling in a way that eased some of her tension. "Come on, let me introduce you around." The next hour was a whirlwind of names and faces, most polite but distant. Tessa could feel the assessment in their eyes, the questions about who she was and why she was there. Isaac stayed close, his presence a steady anchor, subtly steering her away from the most hostile groups and toward those who might give her a fair chance. Then Catherine Jameson arrived with two other people, a distinguished older man and a younger man in his 30s who looked like he spent more on his haircut than Tessa spent on groceries in a month. "That's my father, Richard," Isaac murmured to Tessa, "and my brother, Marcus. Brace yourself." Catherine made her way directly to them, her entourage in tow. "Isaac, you remember the Worthingtons are joining us tonight. Victoria should be arriving shortly." Something flickered across Isaac's face, gone too quickly for Tessa to read. "Of course. Victoria Worthington is someone we've been hoping Isaac would take an interest in," Marcus said loudly enough for several nearby people to hear, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Old family, excellent breeding, perfect for the company's image." "Marcus," Isaac said warningly. "What?" "Just making conversation." Marcus turned his attention to Tessa, looking her up and down in a way that made her skin crawl. "And you must be the charity case Isaac hired. How noble of him." "Marcus," Isaac's voice dropped dangerously low. "That's enough." "It's fine," Tessa said, keeping her voice steady despite the heat rising in her cheeks. She met Marcus's gaze directly. "I'm sure my performance will speak for itself, Mr. Jameson. Unlike some people, I plan to earn my place here rather than coasting on family connections." The barb hit its mark. Marcus's face reddened, but before he could respond, Richard Jameson let out a surprised laugh. "She's got spirit, I'll give her that," Richard said, studying Tessa with new interest. "Reminds me of someone." "Yes. Well, spirit doesn't pay the bills or maintain proper standards," Catherine interjected coldly. "Isaac, we need to discuss this hiring decision. It reflects poorly on the family." "My hiring decisions are not up for family discussion," Isaac replied, his tone brooking no argument. "Tessa was hired on merit, period. Now, if you'll excuse us, I'd like to show her the waterfront view from the terrace." He placed a hand lightly on Tessa's lower back, guiding her away before his mother could protest. The terrace was blessedly empty, cool night air washing over them. Tessa moved to the railing, gripping it tightly, trying to steady herself. "I'm sorry about that," Isaac said, standing beside her. "My family can be horrible," Tessa suggested, then immediately regretted it. "Sorry, that was unprofessional, but accurate." He leaned against the railing, looking out at the harbor lights. "Marcus has always resented that I was named CEO instead of him. My mother thinks I should marry someone from her approved list of society daughters. My father mostly stays out of it, but he's never been great at standing up to my mother. And Victoria Worthington. Someone my mother has been pushing at me for 2 years. Nice enough woman, but there's no connection. She wants the Jameson name and money. I want to be left alone to run my company." He turned to face Tessa. "For what it's worth, you handled Marcus perfectly. He's used to people being intimidated by him." "I've dealt with worse than him," Tessa said. "Try being a woman from the projects trying to get a scholarship. You develop a thick skin fast." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, and Tessa found herself acutely aware of how close Isaac was standing, the subtle scent of his cologne, the way the moonlight caught in his dark hair. This was dangerous territory, she reminded herself. He was her boss, from a completely different world and currently being pressured to pursue someone deemed more suitable. "We should go back inside," she said reluctantly. "Probably." But neither of them moved immediately. Isaac's eyes met hers, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of the connection forming despite all the reasons it should not exist. The moment was broken by the terrace door opening. A stunning blonde woman in a designer gown stepped out, her smile brightening when she saw Isaac. "There you are," she said warmly. "Your mother said you'd stepped out. I'm not interrupting, am I, Victoria?" Isaac said, stepping back from the railing. "No, of course not. This is Tessa Jenkins, one of our new senior analysts. Tessa Victoria Worthington." Victoria's smile remained in place, but her eyes assessed Tessa coolly. "How lovely. Isaac has always been so dedicated to the company. I'm sure you'll do wonderfully." The dismissal in her tone was subtle but clear. "Thank you," Tessa said pleasantly. "I should get back inside anyway." "Enjoy your evening." She left them on the terrace, feeling a strange hollowness in her chest that she refused to examine too closely. Back in the main dining room, she found herself cornered by several other executives who peppered her with questions clearly designed to trip her up. She answered each one carefully, aware that she was being tested, that every word would be reported back to Catherine Jameson. The dinner itself was an ordeal. Tessa was seated far from Isaac, who had Victoria on one side and a board member on the other. She watched as Victoria laughed at his comments, touched his arm possessively, played the perfect potential wife. Catherine looked satisfied, which somehow made everything worse. By the time Tessa made her escape, pleading an early morning, she was exhausted. She caught the bus home, ignoring the text from Isaac asking if she needed a ride. The message felt too complicated to answer. Over the next few weeks, Tessa buried herself in work. The route adjustment she had proposed was approved and implemented, saving the company over $2 million in the first month alone. Other analysts began seeking her input on their projects. Even some of the executives who had been cold at the dinner started treating her with grudging respect. Isaac continued to stop by her office regularly, ostensibly to discuss work, but their conversations inevitably drifted to other topics. She learned about his pressure to live up to his grandfather's legacy, his frustration with family politics, his genuine passion for sustainable business practices. He learned about her brothers, both working multiple jobs to support their families, about her dreams of one day starting a foundation to help kids from backgrounds like hers get educational opportunities. The connection between them deepened despite Tessa's efforts to maintain professional distance. Isaac made her laugh with dry observations about corporate absurdity. She challenged him intellectually in ways that clearly energized him. More than once, Tessa caught him watching her with an expression that made her heart race. But Victoria was a constant presence, appearing at the office for lunch dates with Isaac, attending company events on his arm. Catherine's approval was obvious, as was her continued coldness toward Tessa. The message was clear: know your place. 2 months into her contract, Tessa was working late again when Isaac appeared with Chinese takeout. "You missed lunch," he said, setting the containers on her desk. And probably dinner. When was the last time you ate? Tessa tried to remember and could not. Breakfast, maybe. That's what I thought. He pulled up a chair, unpacking the food. Take a break. That's not a request, that's your CEO ordering you to eat. They shared the meal, talking about the new sustainability initiative Tessa had drafted. Isaac had read her proposal 3 times, he admitted, impressed by its scope and practicality. I want to present it to the board, he said, with you there to explain it. Your mother will fight it, Tessa pointed out. It requires significant upfront investment. Let me worry about my mother. This is exactly the kind of forward-thinking move we need to make. He paused, studying her. You've been avoiding me lately, outside of work discussions, I mean. Tessa's breath caught. She had hoped he had not noticed. I've just been busy. Tessa. His voice was gentle but firm. I know what people are saying. I know the position you're in here. But I value your friendship, and I don't want you to feel like you have to keep me at arm's length. It's complicated, she said finally. Your family already hates me. I don't want to give them more ammunition. My family's opinions are not your responsibility. Isaac leaned forward, his expression intense. You've earned your place here 10 times over. The board members see it, the other analysts see it. Even my father commented that you're the best hire I've made in years. And your mother still disapproves, but she disapproves of everything I do, so that's not new. He smiled slightly. Tessa, I need you to understand something. What my family thinks about where you came from, your background, none of that matters to me. What matters is that you're brilliant, dedicated, and you make me want to be a better leader. That's rare. The way he was looking at her made Tessa's pulse race. This was crossing lines that should not be crossed. Isaac, I can't be the reason you fight with your family. You're not. I've been fighting with them my whole life about their prejudices and outdated values. You're just the latest excuse. He reached across the desk, his hand covering hers. I'm tired of pretending I don't look forward to seeing you every day. That I don't think about you when I should be focused on board reports. That I don't wish I had a good reason to spend every evening working late with you. Tessa's heart hammered. What about Victoria? There is no Victoria, not for me. My mother keeps pushing, but I've made it clear I'm not interested. His thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand. The question is whether you feel even a fraction of what I'm feeling, or if I'm completely misreading this situation. You're not misreading it, Tessa whispered. But this is a terrible idea. The optics alone, I don't care about optics, I care about you. Isaac stood, moving around the desk. Tessa rose to meet him, and suddenly they were inches apart. Tell me to stop, he said softly. Tell me this is just my imagination and I'll back off. We'll keep everything professional. She should tell him to stop, should protect them both from the inevitable fallout. But standing there, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes, feeling the pull that had been growing between them for months, she could not force the words out. Instead, she reached up and touched his face, her fingers trembling slightly. This is going to make everything harder. I know. He covered her hand with his, turning his head to press a kiss to her palm. But I think you're worth it. When he kissed her, gentle and questioning, Tessa felt something inside her unfold. She kissed him back, letting herself feel what she had been denying for weeks. His arms came around her, solid and sure, and for a moment the rest of the world fell away. They broke apart slowly, both breathing unevenly. Isaac rested his forehead against hers. So where does this leave us? Probably in trouble, Tessa admitted, but I don't want to pretend anymore either. Then we don't. He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. We'll be careful, discreet for now. Not because I'm ashamed, but because you don't deserve to be the target of office gossip while you're still proving yourself. Once your 3-month review is done and your position is secure, we'll be open about this. It was a reasonable plan, thoughtful and protective. Tessa nodded agreement, even as she worried about what was coming. Catherine Jameson was not going to take this well. None of his family would. But looking at Isaac, seeing the certainty in his expression, she chose to believe that maybe, just maybe, this could work. The next few weeks were a careful balancing act. At work, Tessa and Isaac maintained professional boundaries, though their connection was undeniable to anyone paying attention. Away from the office, they carved out stolen moments: dinner at quiet restaurants far from the business district, walks along the harbor after dark, late nights at his penthouse apartment, talking until dawn. Tessa learned that Isaac was more than the confident CEO he presented to the world. He had doubts and fears like anyone else, weight of expectation that sometimes crushed him. His grandfather's death 5 years ago still haunted him, the feeling that he could never quite measure up to that legacy. His family's constant criticism had left scars, making him question his own judgment even as he fought to trust it. Isaac learned that Tessa's strength had been hard-won through loss and struggle, that she still sent money to her brothers every month, even when it meant eating ramen for dinner, that she carried guilt about leaving her neighborhood, about succeeding when so many others had not. That underneath her fierce determination was a softness she protected carefully, afraid of being hurt. They fit together in ways Tessa had never experienced before. Isaac challenged her intellectually while making her feel safe emotionally. She grounded him, reminding him of the values he sometimes lost sight of in the corporate world. When they were together, the differences in their backgrounds faded into insignificance. But reality waited outside their bubble. Tessa's 3-month review arrived, conducted by a panel that included Catherine Jameson. The CFO's hostility was barely veiled as she questioned every decision Tessa had made, looking for flaws in her work. But the numbers spoke for themselves. Tessa's analyses had saved the company over $5 million. Her sustainability proposal had garnered positive press attention and interest from environmentally conscious investors. Even the other executives on the panel, some of whom had been skeptical at first, praised her contributions. "It seems you've managed to meet our minimum standards," Catherine said icily when the review concluded. "Your contract will be converted to a permanent position, though I trust you understand that continued employment depends on maintaining these performance levels." "Of course, Mrs. Jameson," Tessa replied calmly, refusing to let the woman see how much the encounter rattled her. Isaac was waiting in his office when she finished, barely containing his satisfaction. "Congratulations. You're officially part of the team. Your mother looked like she wanted to fire me on the spot." "My mother doesn't have that authority. I do, and I'm not going anywhere." He moved closer, keeping his voice low. "This means we don't have to hide anymore. I can take you to company events as my actual date instead of pretending we're just colleagues." Tessa felt a flutter of nervousness. "Are you sure you're ready for that? The gossip alone is going to be intense, and your family will have to accept it," Isaac finished firmly. "Tessa, I'm in love with you. I have been for weeks, maybe longer. I'm not interested in hiding that or apologizing for it." Her breath caught. They had not said those words yet, though she had felt them growing between them. "I love you too," she whispered, "but I'm scared of what this means, the fight we're about to start. Then we fight it together." He kissed her softly. "Starting with the charity gala next weekend. Every major player in the industry will be there, including my entire family. I want you there as my date officially." The gala was the social event of the season, black tie and exclusive. Tessa had never attended anything like it. "I don't even have a dress for something like that." "Then let's fix that." Isaac smiled at her expression. "I know you hate the idea of me buying you things, but this is important to me. Let me do this. They compromised. Isaac took her to a boutique, but Tessa chose a dress that was elegant without being ostentatious, deep blue silk that made her feel beautiful without feeling like she was wearing a costume. When she saw herself in the mirror on gala night, hair styled and makeup done by professionals Isaac had insisted on hiring, she barely recognized the woman looking back at her. Isaac's reaction when he picked her up made the entire experience worthwhile. He stared at her, speechless, for a long moment before finding his voice. "You're absolutely stunning. You clean up pretty well yourself," Tessa replied, taking in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. He looked every inch the powerful CEO, commanding and sophisticated, but his eyes held that warmth reserved only for her. The gala was held at the city's most prestigious hotel, the ballroom glittering with crystal chandeliers and designer gowns. Tessa felt her courage waver as they approached the entrance, but Isaac's hand was steady on her back. "Just breathe," he murmured. "We've got this." The reaction when they entered together was immediate. Conversations paused, heads turned, whispers rippled through the crowd. Tessa kept her head high, her hand tucked into the crook of Isaac's arm as he led her through the room. He made no effort to downplay their relationship, introducing her as his girlfriend to everyone they encountered. Some people were politely welcoming. Others were openly shocked. And then there was Isaac's family. Catherine stood with Richard and Marcus near the bar, Victoria Worthington at their side. The CFO's face went pale with rage when she saw Isaac and Tessa together. "We should probably get this over with," Isaac said quietly. They approached the group, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Catherine's eyes were hard as diamonds, her voice sharp enough to cut. "Isaac, a word in private. Now, anything you need to say to me, you can say in front of Tessa." "Fine." Catherine's gaze swept over Tessa with pure disdain. "You're making a fool of yourself and embarrassing this family. That woman is completely inappropriate for someone in your position." "That woman has a name, and she's standing right here," Tessa said firmly, keeping her voice level despite her anger. "And for the record, Mrs. Jameson, I never asked for your approval or your son's affection. But I have both his respect and his heart, which is more than I can say for the people you've tried to push on him." Victoria's face flushed, but Marcus laughed harshly. "You've got nerve, I'll give you that, but you can't possibly think this is going anywhere. You're a project from the wrong side of the tracks. Isaac will come to his senses eventually." "Enough." Isaac's voice cracked like a whip. "You will all listen to me very carefully. Tessa is the woman I love. That's not going to change because you disapprove. She's brilliant, accomplished, and has more integrity in her little finger than most of the people in this room. If you can't treat her with respect, then you can consider our family relationship as strained as you've made it. You would choose her over your family?" Catherine asked, her voice shaking with fury. "I'm choosing someone who actually cares about me as a person rather than as a figurehead for family ambitions," Isaac replied. "That's you, Mother. You, Marcus, who's only ever seen me as an obstacle to what you think you deserve. The only one of you who's even tried to be neutral is Dad." Richard looked uncomfortable but spoke up. "Son, I understand you care for this young woman, but you have to see how this looks. The family name was built by a dock worker who married a seamstress," Isaac interrupted. "Grandfather would have loved Tessa because she reminds him of himself. You've all forgotten where we came from in your rush to play aristocrat." "Your grandfather would be ashamed of this decision," Catherine hissed. "No," said a voice behind them. "He would be proud." They all turned to find an elderly woman in a wheelchair, attended by a nurse. She had to be in her 80s, thin and frail, but her eyes were sharp and bright. "Aunt Helen," Isaac said, surprised. "I didn't know you were coming." "I wouldn't miss it." Someone has to represent your grandfather properly. Helen maneuvered her wheelchair closer, studying Tessa with interest. So you're the girl causing all this fuss. Come here, let me look at you. Tessa moved forward, nervous but curious. Helen took her hand, examining her face closely. What did your parents do, dear? My mother was a housekeeper and waitress. My father left when I was young. I don't know what he did. And you put yourself through college. Yes, madam, scholarships and work. Helen smiled, transforming her face. You remind me of myself 60 years ago. I was a secretary when I met my husband, Catherine's father. His family nearly disowned him for marrying beneath his station. She turned to Catherine. You seem to have forgotten that, daughter, forgotten where you came from and who gave you opportunities. Mother, that was different. It was exactly the same, Helen said sharply. And if I recall correctly, you weren't thrilled when Richard's family initially looked down on you for being new money. Short memory, Catherine. The rebuke was devastating in its precision. Catherine's mouth opened and closed wordlessly, her face mottled with anger and embarrassment. Helen turned back to Tessa. Don't let these snobs intimidate you, dear. My husband built this company on the principle that merit mattered more than pedigree. Isaac is honoring that legacy, not betraying it. She looked at her great-nephew. I like her. She's got spine. Bring her to tea sometime soon. The encounter shifted something in the room's dynamic. Helen Jameson was the family matriarch, widow of the company's founder, and her opinion carried weight. Her public approval of Tessa, an implicit criticism of Catherine's behavior, rippled through the gathered crowd. The rest of the evening was still challenging, but Tessa found herself fielding fewer hostile questions and more genuine curiosity. Isaac never left her side, his pride in her obvious. They danced together, and in those moments, wrapped in his arms while music swelled around them, the disapproval and whispers faded away. See, Isaac murmured against her hair. We're surviving. Your mother looks like she's planning my murder, Tessa observed, spotting Catherine watching them from across the room. She'll come around, or she won't. Either way, it doesn't change how I feel about you. The following weeks confirmed that Catherine was not planning to come around anytime soon. She made Tessa's work life difficult in small ways, questioning her decisions in meetings, assigning her to projects with impossible deadlines, constantly looking for reasons to criticize. Isaac intervened when he could, but he could not shield Tessa from everything without undermining her independence. Marcus was worse, spreading rumors about Tessa's past, implying she had slept her way into her position. The whispers followed her through the office, and more than once, Tessa had to fight tears of frustration in the privacy of the bathroom. I'm making everything harder for you, she said to Isaac one night in his apartment. Your family relationship is destroyed. People at work are questioning your judgment, and for what? For me, for us, Isaac corrected, pulling her close. And yes, it's hard right now. But Tessa, you are not responsible for my family's bigotry or the office gossip's small-mindedness. Those are their problems, not yours. But if we just know, he tilted her face up to meet his eyes. I know what you're about to suggest, and the answer is no. We're not breaking up to make other people comfortable. I love you. That's not negotiable. Tessa leaned into him, drawing strength from his certainty. I love you too. I just hate that loving me costs you so much. It costs me nothing that matters, Isaac said softly. My relationship with my mother was already strained. Marcus has always been jealous and petty. What I've gained by being with you, the happiness and partnership and love, that's worth any amount of family drama. The crisis came 2 months later. Tessa arrived at work to find her office access revoked and a message to report to HR immediately. The HR director, a nervous woman named Patricia, looked uncomfortable as she explained that there had been complaints about Tessa's conduct. "What kind of complaints?" Tessa demanded, her stomach sinking. "Allegations that you've used your personal relationship with Mr. Jameson to gain unfair advantages, that you've shared confidential information inappropriately, and that your behavior with the CEO is unprofessional." Patricia would not meet her eyes. "These are serious accusations, Miss Jenkins. You're being placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Who filed these complaints? That information is confidential." But Tessa did not need to be told. This had Catherine's fingerprints all over it. She left the building, her hands shaking, and called Isaac from the parking lot. He was in her apartment within an hour, his face dark with fury. "I've already talked to HR. These allegations are complete fabrication, and I know exactly where they came from. Your mother and Marcus. They filed a formal complaint with the board, claiming that your relationship with me constitutes a conflict of interest and that I've shown favoritism." Isaac paced her small living room, his anger barely contained. "They're trying to force the board to choose between you or me stepping down as CEO." Tessa felt cold all over. "Then I'll resign. I won't let them use me to take away everything you've built." "No." Isaac stopped pacing and gripped her shoulders. "That's exactly what they want. For you to disappear quietly so they can pretend this never happened and I'll fall in line with their expectations. But if the choice is between me and your career, there is no choice. I choose you." His voice was fierce, absolute. "But I'm not planning to lose my career either. I've already called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow. We're going to settle this once and for all." That night, Tessa barely slept. Isaac stayed with her, holding her through her anxiety, but she could feel the tension in his body. By morning, they were both exhausted and worried. The board meeting was held in Jameson Maritime's main conference room. Tessa waited outside, barred from the proceedings, while Isaac faced the board alone. Through the glass walls, she could see the assembled executives, Catherine and Marcus seated prominently, both looking satisfied. The meeting lasted 3 hours. Tessa spent the time walking the halls, unable to sit still. Other employees gave her wide berth, and she knew the whole office was buzzing with speculation. Finally, the conference room doors opened. Isaac emerged, his expression unreadable. Catherine and Marcus followed, both looking furious. Richard trailed behind, appearing troubled. "My office," Isaac said quietly to Tessa. She followed him, her heart pounding. Once the door closed behind them, Isaac's carefully controlled facade cracked. He pulled her into a tight embrace, holding her like she might disappear. "What happened?" Tessa asked, her voice muffled against his chest. "I gave them an ultimatum," Isaac said, pulling back to look at her. "I told the board that if they pursued these baseless allegations against you, I would resign as CEO and take my shares to start a competing company. I also pointed out that 3 board members have children who married people my mother would consider inappropriate, and that opening this can of worms sets a dangerous precedent. And the board voted to dismiss the complaints as without merit. You're reinstated effective immediately with a formal apology. Furthermore, I convinced them to implement a new policy protecting employees from retaliatory actions based on their backgrounds or personal relationships, as long as those relationships are properly disclosed and managed." Tessa sagged with relief. "And your family?" Isaac's expression hardened. "My mother has been given a formal warning about workplace harassment. If she continues to create a hostile environment for you or anyone else, she'll be removed from her position as CFO, family or not. Marcus has been removed from his position as VP of Operations entirely. The board agreed he's been underperforming for years, and this complaint was the last straw. He'll blame me for that. He should blame himself and his own incompetence. Isaac cupped her face gently. It's over, Tessa. You won. We won. The tears Tessa had been holding back finally spilled over. I was so scared I was going to lose you. Never, Isaac promised, kissing her softly. I told you you're worth fighting for, and I'll keep fighting for us as long as I need to. The aftermath was messy. Marcus left the company entirely, taking a job with a competitor and making bitter comments to anyone who would listen. Catherine remained as CFO but was notably cold and distant, though she stopped actively sabotaging Tessa's work. Richard made awkward attempts at reconciliation, inviting Isaac and Tessa to family dinners that were stilted and uncomfortable. But there were victories, too. Tessa's sustainability initiative was implemented company-wide, earning Jameson maritime recognition as an industry leader in environmental responsibility. Her work continued to exceed expectations, and gradually, even the most skeptical executives began treating her as the professional she was rather than as Isaac's controversial girlfriend. 6 months after the board meeting, Isaac took Tessa to dinner at an intimate restaurant overlooking the harbor. She had been here before with him, but tonight felt different. He was nervous in a way she rarely saw, his hands restless as they waited for their meal. There's something I want to talk to you about, Isaac began, then paused as their server arrived with wine. Tessa waited, curious and a little worried. Isaac took a sip of wine, set down his glass, and took her hand. This past year has been the hardest and best of my life, he said. Hard because of all the obstacles we've faced, the resistance and prejudice and family drama. But best because I've spent it with you. You've made me better, Tessa. More aware of my privilege, more committed to using my position to create positive change, more willing to stand up for what I believe in rather than what's expected. Isaac, let me finish, he said gently. I know we've only been together for about 10 months officially, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You're my partner in every sense of the word. You challenge me, support me, love me not for what I have but for who I am. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Tessa's breath stopped as he opened it, revealing a stunning ring, a single diamond in a classic setting, elegant and perfect. Tessa Jenkins, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving to you that love is stronger than prejudice, that we're stronger together than any obstacle we'll face? Tessa's vision blurred with tears. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, absolutely yes. Isaac slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then pulled her up and into his arms, kissing her deeply while the other diners around them burst into applause. When they finally broke apart, both were crying and laughing at the same time. I love you, Tessa said, pressing her forehead to his. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. I love you more than I knew it was possible to love someone, Isaac replied. And I promise you, Tessa, I will spend every day making sure you never regret taking a chance on us. The engagement was announced the next day, sparking another round of media attention and gossip. Catherine's response was a terse congratulations that fooled no one. Marcus sent nothing. But Richard surprised them both by calling personally to express his genuine happiness, admitting that he had come to respect Tessa's strength and integrity. The real surprise came from Helen, who invited them to her estate for tea. The house was a grand old mansion, filled with history and warmth. Helen served them herself, waving away her nurse's attempts to help. I wanted to give you this, Helen said, handing Tessa a worn leather journal. It's my diary from the years when I was first married to Catherine's father, the things his family said about me, the obstacles they put in our way. I want you to know that what you're experiencing is not new, and it's not your fault." Tessa paged through the journal, reading entries that could have been written about her own life. The pain and determination in Helen's words resonated deeply. "How did you get through it?" Tessa asked. "The same way you will," Helen replied, taking Isaac's hand and then Tessa's, joining them together. "With love, stubbornness, and the certainty that proving them wrong is the best revenge. My husband and I built a beautiful life together despite his family's disapproval. Eventually, most of them came around. Those who didn't weren't worth our time anyway." She squeezed their joined hands. "You two have something real. Don't let anyone diminish that. And Isaac, your grandfather would be so proud of you, not just for running the company well, but for having the courage to follow your heart." The words were a benediction, healing something in both of them. When they left Helen's house that afternoon, Tessa felt lighter than she had in months. The wedding planning was its own adventure. Tessa wanted something small and meaningful, while Isaac's position meant there were expectations for a large society affair. They compromised, planning a ceremony that honored both their worlds. The wedding took place on a beautiful summer day, 10 months after the proposal. The venue was a historic lighthouse overlooking the ocean, intimate but elegant. Tessa's brothers walked her down the aisle, both wearing suits they had clearly bought for the occasion. Her neighborhood friends filled several rows, dressed in their best and looking both proud and awed. Isaac's side was more complicated. Richard and his second wife attended, as did Helen in her wheelchair, beaming with joy. Several board members and executives came, along with colleagues who had become genuine friends to both of them. Catherine and Marcus were notably absent, though Isaac had extended the invitation as a courtesy. As Tessa walked toward Isaac, seeing him wait for her with wonder and love in his eyes, she felt the rightness of this moment settle into her bones. Nothing about their journey had been easy, but every struggle had brought them here, to this perfect day. The ceremony was beautiful, their vows heartfelt and honest. When Isaac promised to be her partner in all things, to stand beside her against any challenge, his voice shook with emotion. When Tessa promised to love him not for his name or his wealth, but for the good man he was, tears streamed down both their faces. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant declared, and Isaac kissed her like they were the only two people in the world. The reception was a celebration that bridged their two worlds. Tessa's brothers gave heartfelt toasts about watching their little sister refuse to let circumstances define her future. Helen told embarrassing stories about young Isaac that had everyone laughing. Even Richard stood up to speak, his words awkward but sincere as he welcomed Tessa to the family. Late in the evening, as they danced under string lights with the ocean breeze carrying the scent of salt and flowers, Isaac pulled Tessa close. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. "Not a single one," Tessa replied. "Though I have to admit, a year ago I never imagined I'd be here, dancing at my own wedding with a man who was willing to risk everything for me." "I didn't risk anything that mattered," Isaac said, "and I gained everything. You're my home, Tessa. Whatever else happens, wherever life takes us, as long as I have you, I have what I need." "Same," Tessa whispered. I love you more." They swayed together as the music played, surrounded by people who had come to celebrate their union, and Tessa felt a profound gratitude for every hardship that had led her to this moment. She had faced prejudice and fought against those who tried to keep her in her place. She had fallen in love with a man from a completely different world and refused to let that stop her. She had proven that background did not determine worth, that love could overcome even the most entrenched resistance. Life after the wedding settled into a new rhythm. Tessa continued her work at Jameson Maritime, taking on increasingly important projects. She and Isaac worked together to transform the company culture, implementing programs to recruit and support talented people from disadvantaged backgrounds. The Tessa and Isaac Jameson Foundation, established on their first anniversary, provided scholarships and mentorship to students from low-income communities. Catherine never fully warmed to Tessa, but time softened her hostility into cool civility. She remained involved in the company, but no longer actively opposed Isaac's decisions. Marcus they saw rarely, though through the grapevine they heard he was struggling at his new position. Richard became an unexpected ally, his respect for Tessa growing as he saw how well she and Isaac worked together. He and Helen often joined them for family dinners, and gradually the Jameson family began to heal from years of rigid expectations and judgment. 2 years after the wedding, Tessa gave birth to their first child, a daughter they named Grace Helen after Isaac's grandmother. Holding her baby girl, Tessa thought about everything she wanted to teach her. That kindness mattered more than status, that hard work and integrity opened doors, that love was worth fighting for even when the fight was hard. Isaac sat beside her hospital bed, staring at his daughter with wonder. "She's perfect," he murmured, gently touching Grace's tiny hand. "She is," Tessa agreed. "And she's going to grow up knowing that she can be anything she wants, love anyone she chooses, and that her worth isn't determined by what family she was born into or how much money her parents have." "She's also going to grow up with the most amazing mother," Isaac added, leaning over to kiss Tessa softly. "Thank you, for Grace, for our life, for not giving up on us when it would have been so much easier." "I could never give up on us," Tessa said, watching her daughter sleep peacefully. "You and we proved that love is stronger than prejudice, that two people from different worlds can build something beautiful together. That's not something you give up on." Helen came to visit the next day, tears streaming down her face as she held her great-great-granddaughter. "She looks like you," she told Tessa. "Strong already. Your mother would be so proud of everything you've accomplished." The words made Tessa's throat tight. She thought often about her mother, wishing she could have been here to see how everything turned out. But somehow, holding Grace while surrounded by people who loved them, Tessa felt her mother's presence, a whisper of approval and pride. 3 years later they welcomed twin boys, Henry and James. The Jameson house was full of laughter and chaos, expensive toys mixed with hand-me-downs, lessons about privilege and responsibility woven into everyday parenting. Tessa and Isaac worked hard to give their children a grounded upbringing despite the wealth surrounding them. Catherine softened considerably when she became a grandmother, her interactions with Tessa growing warmer as she watched her son's happiness. She never apologized for her initial treatment of Tessa, but the change in her behavior spoke louder than words ever could. On their 5th anniversary, Isaac surprised Tessa with a trip back to her old neighborhood. They visited her mother's grave, where Tessa introduced Isaac all over again and told her mother about their children. Then they stopped by the diner where Tessa had worked through college. The owner, Maria, was still there, older but still running the place with efficient warmth. She hugged Tessa fiercely when they walked in. "Look at you," Maria said, tears in her eyes. "I always knew you'd do something amazing, and this must be the famous husband." They sat at the counter, eating burgers and fries just like Tessa used to during her breaks. Isaac listened as Maria told stories about young Tessa, always studying between orders, refusing to let exhaustion stop her from pursuing her dreams. "I'm starting a scholarship program," Tessa told Maria. "For employees here and at other places like this. People who are working their way through school and need help. I was hoping you'd be willing to help me identify candidates." Maria's eyes welled up. Of course. Oh, honey, your mother would be so proud. Later, walking through the streets where Tessa grew up, Isaac squeezed her hand. Thank you for sharing this with me, for letting me really understand where you came from. It's part of who I am, Tessa replied, looking at the familiar buildings with affection despite their worn appearance. I used to be ashamed of this place, of being the poor girl, but now I see it as my foundation. Everything I survived here made me strong enough to fight for us. And I'm grateful for every experience that shaped you into the woman I love, Isaac said. Though I wish you hadn't had to struggle so hard. The struggle made me appreciate what we have, Tessa pointed out, and it gave me perspective. I'll never take our life for granted, and I'll never forget what it's like to be dismissed because of where you're from. They stood outside her childhood apartment building, and Tessa felt the full weight of how far she had come. From this place of lack and struggle to a life of abundance and love. But more than the material changes, she had gained something precious. Proof that she was enough exactly as she was, that love could transcend class and prejudice, that standing up for yourself and what you believed in mattered. At 32, Tessa was promoted to VP of Strategic Development at Jameson Maritime, the youngest person ever to hold that position. Isaac stood beside her at the announcement, his pride obvious. The promotion was based purely on merit, her track record speaking for itself, but it still felt like a victory over everyone who had doubted her. The company continued to thrive under their joint vision. Sustainability initiatives became industry standards. The scholarship program expanded. Jameson Maritime was recognized not just for profitability, but for ethical practices and social responsibility. On their 10th anniversary, Isaac and Tessa renewed their vows in a small ceremony attended only by family and close friends. Catherine was there, hugging Tessa warmly and apologizing, finally, for her initial treatment. I was wrong about you, Catherine said simply. I let prejudice and snobbery blind me to the kind of person you really are. You've been good for my son and good for this family. I'm sorry it took me so long to see that. The apology, years late but sincere, meant more than Tessa expected. She accepted it graciously, and something old and painful finally healed between them. Standing beside Isaac, renewing the promises they had made a decade before, Tessa reflected on their journey. It had not been easy or simple. They had faced opposition, fought battles, struggled against prejudice and family expectations. But they had also built something real and lasting, a partnership rooted in mutual respect and genuine love. I would do it all again, Isaac whispered as they danced at the reception, their children watching with delight. Every fight, every obstacle, every moment of doubt. Because it all led here to this life with you. Me too, Tessa replied, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. You proved them all wrong, you know. Everyone who said we wouldn't last, that the differences were too big, that love wasn't enough. We proved them wrong, Isaac corrected. Together, that's the only way we could have done it. As the evening faded into night and their children fell asleep in their grandparents' arms, Tessa and Isaac stood together looking out at the ocean. The lighthouse where they had married stood in the distance, its beams sweeping across the dark water, a symbol of guidance and hope. They had started as two people from different worlds, brought together by chance and held together by choice. Their love had weathered storms of prejudice and opposition, emerging stronger for it. They had built not just a relationship but a family, a legacy, a life that proved background mattered less than character, that class lines could be crossed, that love truly could conquer all. Here's to the next 10 years, Isaac said, raising his glass. And all the years after that, Tessa added, clinking her glass against his. They drank to their future, to their children, to the love that had started in a corporate office and grown into something that changed both their lives completely. The girl from the projects and the CEO had proven that love knew no boundaries, that worth was not measured by bank accounts or family names, and that sometimes the best love stories were the ones no one expected but everyone could learn from. As stars appeared overhead and music drifted from the reception, Tessa Jenkins Jameson stood in her husband's arms and knew with absolute certainty that every hardship, every fight, every moment of doubt had been worth it. They had not just fallen in love. They had chosen each other every day, fought for their right to be together, and built a life that honored both where they came from and where they were going. Their story was not a fairy tale. It was better. It was real, messy, hard-won, and absolutely worth every moment. And as they kissed under the stars, surrounded by the life they had built together, both knew that the best chapters were still to come.